Have you ever stayed silent in the face of an insult, not because you were weak, but because you knew your reaction was a gift no one deserved? There are days when a single cold glance is enough to unravel your peace. A careless comment, a small act of disrespect, and suddenly your entire day spirals into anger. Strangely, the more you try to remain calm, the more the world seems to conspire to unbalance you. As if people instinctively sense your weak spot and press into it without mercy. But what if you stopped letting them reach you? What if you lived as though no one had the power to shake you? Not by suppressing your emotions, but by mastering them. Not through a hardened shell, but through a calm that runs deep. In today's video, we'll explore what the Stoics called the inner fortress, a place where insults, storms, and judgments find no place to land. 1. Don't react to everything, only to what deserves your energy. There is a kind of freedom no one can give you and no one can take away. It is the freedom to choose your response. The right to remain silent when others want you to explode. The right to walk away when they expect you to stay and argue. The right to smile when they hope to see you fall apart. In a world obsessed with instant reactions, the one who knows how to pause becomes the one who holds the highest power, because they don't get pulled into someone else's game. They own the board by refusing to play when the game is beneath them. Not everything that happens deserves a response. Not every insult is worthy of your reply, and not everyone who approaches you comes with good intentions. Some show up just to test your limits. Some talk only to find your weakness, and if you react on impulse, you're letting them define your worth. Every time you lose your temper, you hand over your power. Every time you respond without thinking, you become a pawn in someone else's script. The Stoic doesn't stay silent out of fear, but because they've outgrown the need to always speak. They are not repressing, they are choosing. Reacting to everything doesn't make you strong. It makes you predictable, easily manipulated, and eventually lost. A truly calm person doesn't lack emotion. They have clarity not to act on every emotion. Like a still lake, not because there's no wind, but because it's deep enough to not be stirred by every breeze. There is one simple practice that can change your life. Every time you're about to react, pause and ask yourself, does this truly matter? Does it affect my values? Am I responding from wisdom or from a bruised ego? Most of the time you'll realize nothing is worth trading your peace for. Most of what we see as attacks are just noise. They hold no power unless you give it to them. Silence is not avoidance. It's a choice. A choice to not lower yourself below the standards you've set for your life. When you stop reacting to the trivial, you tell the world and yourself that you're no longer shaken by things unworthy of you. You start saving your energy for what truly matters. The career you're building, the principles you're defending, the person you're becoming. You're no longer a slave to emotion, but a master of it. And in a world driven by feelings, that makes you rare. Look at those who are truly grounded. They don't argue on the internet. They don't explode over being misunderstood. They don't feel the need to answer every question because they know time is limited and attention is finite. You can spend your whole life reacting to small things, or you can direct your energy into building a life no one can tear down. That choice is made in every reaction you give. Either hold it and let it guide you, or throw it away and become someone else's puppet. 2. Composure isn't numbness, it's training. People often mistake composure for a cold heart. They think that if you don't get angry, don't get sad, don't react, you must be emotionless, distant, drained. But those who have truly faced storms understand. Composure doesn't come from lacking emotion, but from knowing where to place it. It isn't indifference, it's refinement. It's not numbness, it's a choice in how you respond. You can't fake calm, and you can't borrow peace from a few quotes. Composure is forged day by day, in silence, in moments you want to scream but stay quiet, when you want to collapse but keep standing, when you're ready to quit but take another step. There's no spotlight, no applause, just you and a silent storm inside which you must face alone, unseen. A Stoic is not someone who feels nothing, but someone who refuses to let fleeting emotions define them. They know that strength is not about being untouched, but about staying intact in the face of hurt. A calm person isn't someone with nothing left to lose. They're someone who's lost enough to know what's truly worth keeping. And from all the times they were knocked down by their own emotions, they've learned how not to fall the same way again. Composure doesn't come from peaceful mornings, but from quiet nights when you face yourself, with no one left to blame, no excuses left to make, and must ask, did I live by reason, or just follow my emotions? And every honest answer becomes a new layer of armor. Not to fight the world, but to stop the world from breaking you from within. Don't assume calm people are passive, weak, or unaware of anger. They know it, but they don't let it burst out meaninglessly. They hold it, observe it, analyze it, and if they respond, they do so with preparation, not impulse. They choose the battlefield. They don't get dragged into someone else's trench. They're not easily manipulated by those who poke at emotions because they've trained themselves to live above emotion not by denying it, but by refusing to let it drive. Many people react fast just to prove they're alive. But there's another kind, the kind who live in such a way that nothing can shake their direction. They don't act dangerous, but make others cautious. They don't shout, but command attention. And the most unsettling part? They don't even try to be that way. It's who they've become, forged through small daily choices. Patience where anger is easy, reason where softness tempts, steadiness when everything feels like it's falling apart. If you ask what the path to composure looks like, it isn't walking away from emotions, but walking into them with open eyes, a sharp mind, and a heart that knows its limits. It's not a rosy path, but a silent, sharpened, and steady one. And when you're no longer afraid of your own emotions, you no longer need to pretend you're strong, because by then, you truly are unshakable. 3. Learn to let go without carrying the pain. Forgiveness isn't a noble act reserved for the soft-hearted. It's a survival skill for those who want to live without being imprisoned by the past. But true forgiveness isn't the erasure of memory, nor the denial of pain. It's learning to move forward without carrying a silent boulder heavier than any insult ever thrown your way. Some wounds are invisible. No blood, no tears, no accusations. Just a colder look, a careless word, a moment of being forgotten when you needed them most. These small things, if left unchecked, quietly pile up into a storm of resentment. And one day, you don't even recognize yourself. You become guarded, rigid, suspicious. Not because you're cruel, but because you're exhausted from carrying cuts and pretending they're healed. Stoics don't live to make peace with the world. They live to protect their peace from the world. Forgiveness, in their eyes, isn't outward. It's inward purification. When someone wrongs you, letting it go doesn't mean what they did is acceptable. It means you refuse to let it linger in your mind longer than necessary. You don't let it infect your sleep, your conversations, or the reactions you no longer understand. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. Sometimes you'll remember for life, But instead of letting that memory poison your spirit, you place it outside your inner circle as a lesson, not a wound. You see it, but it no longer steers you. You mention it, but it no longer hurts. And when that happens, you'll know you've truly moved on. The real danger isn't that someone hurt you. It's that you keep the pain like evidence. You look at it every day, reminding yourself not to trust, not to love, not to soften. But eventually you'll see. It's you who's keeping the wound alive, while they may have left long ago. The price of not letting go is a life lived in constant defense, and no one can live peacefully while always bracing for war. Letting go isn't because they deserve forgiveness. It's because you deserve peace. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself so you no longer have to flinch at certain memories, no longer react from an old wound someone unknowingly touched. So you can move forward not as someone who was hurt, but as someone who learned never to let pain define them. 4. You don't need to be understood. You just need to be true to yourself. We grow up with an illusion that if we live kindly, sincerely, and rightly, others will understand us, that if we harm no one will have reason to hurt us. But then reality hits like a cold slap, where the more honest you are, the more people distort you. Where kindness isn't always met with goodwill, and silence isn't always seen as peace, but sometimes labeled as arrogance, apathy, or weakness. You cannot control someone else's perception because their perception isn't shaped by who you are, but by the lens of their own insecurities, biases, and personal expectations. They don't see you with their eyes, they see you through their fears and their emptiness. And no matter how much you try to explain, you cannot reach a mind that's already closed. The more you try to justify, the more you place yourself at a disadvantage. The more desperate you are to be understood, the more dependent you become on others' validation, and that is the beginning of losing yourself. The Stoic does not seek agreement because they don't define themselves by the crowd's approval. They live by reason, not by the emotions stirred by how others see them. Because they know. What makes someone unshakable isn't being liked. It's having the courage to live by their own values, even when it makes them feel alone. Integrity may isolate you, but that isolation is far more valuable than belonging that's built on pretending. You don't need everyone to understand you. You just need to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and for whom. When you spend too much energy explaining, you slowly lose your ability to walk forward with certainty. You start adjusting yourself not to stay true, but to avoid being misunderstood. You change your words, your tone, your gaze not to be authentic, but to cause less confusion. And one day, you look back and no longer recognize yourself. That's not growth. That's a quiet unraveling from within. The truth is, you can spend your entire life correcting how people see you and still fail. But if you focus on living by principle, on speaking through action instead of explanation, on being honest rather than pleasing the crowd, you'll see. You don't need to be understood, and you don't need to understand everything either. You just need to keep your mind clear, your words direct, your actions firm, and let time reveal who's deep enough to see your real nature. The farther you go, the more you'll realize. Some people come into your life only to misunderstand you. They're not enemies, just side characters who don't grasp the depth of your story. And you don't need to rewrite the script for every skimmer. You just need to keep writing in your tone, your rhythm, your chosen path. Because inner peace never came from being heard. It comes from no longer needing to explain yourself. 5. Silent and steady. Don't let yourself be pulled into someone else's game. Not every battle needs to be won. And not every provocation deserves a response. Some battles aren't created to determine who's right or wrong. but simply to drag you into the swamp of reactivity. A cunning enemy never attacks with weapons. They plant a glance, a seemingly innocent comment, and wait for you to set yourself on fire with your own anger. And here lies the danger. If you can't see through it, you'll end up playing their game willingly. We often think reacting is a sign of vitality, a show of strength, proof that we are not weak. But the Stoic knows this. The strongest person in the room is not the loudest. It's the one calm enough to discern their battlefield from a glittering trap. They don't need to win every verbal exchange, because they don't play games designed by others. They choose silence not out of weakness, but because they know. If you let yourself drop to a lower frequency, then even if you're right, you still lose. This world is full of people who know exactly how to trigger your rage, ignite your reaction, and then walk away from the mess like nothing happened. They know how to turn you into the villain in the very story they started. They say one thing, you respond with 10, and only you end up judged. Don't think their passive-aggressive remarks are random. Don't assume their jabs are innocent. Some people exist to provoke the worst in you, then stand aside and watch you destroy your own image. A trained mind doesn't need to play every game. It doesn't need to speak in every dialogue. It doesn't need to defend itself at every turn. It's lucid enough to know its presence is already a declaration, and its steadiness is already a response. No raised voice, no retaliation, just unshaken. And it's that immovable calm that throws the other off balance. Because people can script a fight, but no one is ever ready for the sharpness of sudden silence. You don't need to accept every challenge to prove your worth. Some games are built not for you to win, but to make you forget who you are. The Stoic understands, when you get swept into someone else's rhythm, you surrender your own. And once your rhythm is lost, your freedom is gone. All that's left is reaction. To be silent and steady isn't an escape from conflict, it is the height of control. When you stop reacting according to others' expectations, you create a void. That void is where you reclaim your position, reset your boundaries, and signal to others that you are not easily manipulated. You no longer live in a world where anyone can push your buttons. You've entered the realm of independence, where you are no longer a reaction, but a principle. 6. What you can't control, learn to let go with order. There are things you want to hold on to at all costs, but they still slip away. There are people you try to keep with everything you have left, but they still turn their backs. And there are dreams you've chased for years, only to accept, in the end, that they were never yours to keep. The harsh truth is, no matter how hard you try, some things will remain out of reach. And if you refuse to face that, you'll end up in a silent struggle with the world, with fate, and with yourself. We're often taught, never give up, that everything can change if we just try hard enough. But the Stoics teach something else. Make a clear distinction between what's in your control and what isn't. Because if you don't, you'll waste your strength on battles with no end, burn yourself in anger over what will never change, and eventually declare the world unjust when in fact, you simply refuse to set limits on things that were never yours. Letting go does not mean giving up. Letting go is not surrender. Letting go is the conscious act of a lucid mind. It is looking straight at the truth and choosing no longer to resist it. It is refusing to let emotion override reason and learning to rise from places you once thought would break you. Letting go is the art of someone who knows. Sometimes, victory isn't in what you hold, but in knowing when to release, so you have energy left to hold what matters more. You can't control the weather, but you can learn to walk through the rain without resentment. You can't change someone's heart, but you can change how you respond to betrayal. You can't control death, loss, being hurt, misunderstood or discarded, but you can control the one thing that's never been taken from you, your response to all of it. Imagine your mind as a home. If you let everything from the outside rush in, anyone can dirty it. Rearrange your furniture, make noise in your sacred space. But if you lock the door when needed, clean often, and keep only what matters, your inner world becomes organized, stable, and nearly unshakable. The world will always be chaotic. People will never act exactly how you want. Events will always drift from the plan. And if you react to every little thing, there'll be nothing left of you. The Stoic does not let go in resignation, but in order with reason, with boundaries, with purpose. They don't live to control the world, they live to control themselves in it. And when you master that, you don't need to control anymore because you've already taken ownership. 7. Not everything needs to be said. Sometimes silence is supreme. We are raised in a world where speech is seen as power, where wisdom is equated with debate, where the one who speaks the most, the fastest, the loudest is assumed to hold authority. But if you look closely, you'll notice the most formidable person in the room is rarely the one who talks the most, but the one who speaks so little that everyone adjusts their tone the moment they open their mouth. That is the power of silence, something that never speaks, yet is always heard. Silence, on the surface, may be avoidance, but on a deeper level, it is a strategy, it is mastery. It is the terrain you retreat to, not because you're afraid to lose, but because you clearly see the game isn't worth winning. You don't need to speak in every conversation, respond to every attack, or defend yourself in every potential misunderstanding. Because you know some words, if spoken, will drag you down to the same frequency as someone you never wanted to become. To the Stoic, silence isn't weakness. It is the highest form of self-command. In a world addicted to noise, the quiet one is always the unknown, unsettling, unreadable. When you don't speak, no one knows what you think. When you don't react, no one knows your boundaries. And in that space, you are neither manipulated, nor labeled, nor trapped in the verbal snares others craft to probe you. Timely silence is a shield that guards you from the petty. There are times you want to clap back, clarify, reclaim fairness, but then you choose silence. Not because you're wrong, but because you know if you speak, you'll lose something more valuable, your inner stillness. The cost of always needing to reply is that you live in permanent defense. But the cost of timely silence is that you preserve a world within that remains untouched by external storms. And sometimes it's that silence that forces others to reflect. When you no longer rush to correct misunderstandings, they must search for the truth themselves. When you don't reply to offense, they must face their own behavior. When you refuse to argue, they must wrestle with the emptiness your absence leaves behind. Silence is not merely the lack of words, it is the powerful presence of someone who no longer needs to prove anything. Silence is an art, and like all art, it requires practice. You must learn to endure the space, to let go of the urge to control the narrative, to move past the impulse to make it clear. That is when you no longer need others to validate your truth, because you've grown strong enough not to convince them. And in that quiet space, another voice arises, not spoken, but heard from deep within, the sound of your own composure. 8. Discipline is the choice you repeat when no one is watching. There's a brutal truth few want to accept. No one really cares how hard you're trying, how much you've sacrificed, or what it costs you to stay true to your path. The world only looks at results. Only what's visible, tangible, measurable gets a voice. The rest, your endurance, happens in silence. No one pats you on the back for not losing your temper today. No one applauds you for not lashing out. No one sees the inner wars you've won just to stay soft in a world that hardens people. And that's precisely what makes discipline a rare power, because it needs no audience. It doesn't crave the spotlight. It is the lonely repetition of right choices even when no one is watching, even when you see no clear reward, even when everything in you wants to give up. Discipline is not emotion, it is action. It is getting out of bed when your heart is hollow. It's keeping a small promise no one knows about. It's continuing the path without applause. The Stoic knows real value isn't found in the explosive moment, but in the unseen repetition. A grounded person doesn't need to become extraordinary overnight. They only need to do the right thing consistently, patiently, endlessly, until it becomes their nature. You don't need to conquer everything today. You only need to not lose to who you were yesterday. And if you do that long enough, you'll surpass those who rely only on fleeting motivation. Discipline is what makes you stand out in a world spinning with change. When others chase trends, you hold your standard. When others retreat in doubt, you move forward. When others trade principles for gain, you remain whole. And each small action, though unseen, is engraving the shape of someone who cannot be molded by circumstances. What makes you unshakable is not that you never fall, but that you rise without losing your dignity. You know there will be days you don't want to try, don't want to hold firm, don't want to be composed, but still, you choose. You choose silence. You choose forward. You choose to live by what you believe, not what's convenient. And in those unseen moments, you are building a strength nothing can destroy. You don't need the world to notice. You only need to live in such a way that one day, even in silence, people sense that this is someone who will not bend. Someone forged through thousands of quiet victories. And when they ask how you became that way, you won't say a word, because the answer is written in the silent path you've walked over and over for years. 9. Power doesn't come from what happens, but how you face it. No one is immune to bad situations. No one lives untouched by loss, betrayal, injustice, failure, or moments so dark even light hesitates to knock. But what sets people apart isn't what they endure, it's how they meet it. Two people may face the same adversity, one becomes bitter, the other grows wiser. One collapses in pain, the other uses the pain as fuel. So what makes the difference? Not the circumstance, but the inner posture facing it. The Stoic doesn't seek a smooth life. They prepare for one that may be full of storms, yet choose to stay grounded. They understand that life doesn't have to be peaceful to be livable. It just requires that you not be swept away when the storm hits. What they train daily is not how to avoid hardship, but how to remain whole within it. Because the nature of life is uncertainty, and if you can only stay centered when things are calm, your stability is too fragile to be called strength. You may lose a job, be betrayed, receive a crushing diagnosis, or be cast aside by someone you trusted most. But what happens doesn't have to define you. You can let it break you or forge you into something stronger. Pain may strike, but how you respond determines whether it becomes a curse or a turning point. You can't stop the flood, but you can learn to swim. True strength doesn't come from an unbreakable image, it comes from a repeated choice, not to let the moment drag you below the values you've chosen. It's the ability to stand firm in what matters, even when that brings no immediate reward. It's resisting the urge to lash out, even when it's burning inside. It's acting with reason, even when emotion screams. That strength can't be gifted. You have to forge it yourself, day by day, decision by decision, moment by moment. And when you look at the people you truly admire, you'll notice none of them grew up in ease. They all stood at the edge of despair, doubted themselves, wanted to disappear. But they stayed. Not because they weren't afraid, but because they faced fear enough to turn it into fuel. They didn't run from hardship. They entered it, faced it, endured it, understood it, and walked out reborn into someone no one expected. You're not strong because life spared you. You're strong because you didn't let trials steal your character. You don't choose what comes, but you choose your stance when it arrives. And that stance, that posture, is where real inner power is shaped. The Stoic doesn't live to avoid storms, they live so that even in the eye of one, they remain the calmest presence at the center. 10. Act in silence, because it's results that make people listen. The world today is not lacking in words. People make promises just to impress, speak with confidence just to mask doubt, and perform only to distract from inner emptiness. But precisely because there is so much artificial noise, silence becomes expensive. Not the silence of avoidance, but the quiet of someone who is truly working. The one who doesn't need to announce every step, because they know if you go far enough, others will seek you out to ask how you did it. You don't need to tell anyone you're changing. You don't need to declare you're training discipline, mastering your emotions, or becoming unshakable step by step. The things that truly grow always unfold in silence. A tree does not announce when it buds. Lava doesn't call attention before it erupts, and you don't need noise to become powerful. The world doesn't believe in talk. It believes in what's undeniable, and results are the only thing that holds that kind of power. The Stoic does not use words to claim their place. They let action draw the line. They don't need to convince others they're right, don't need to defend themselves when misunderstood, and don't need to explain to be trusted. They know. The fewer the words, the louder each action speaks. And while others build images with words, they lay foundations in the dark. It's not false humility, it's strategy, it's commitment. It's a kind of strength that needs no witness until it can no longer be ignored. Acting in silence demands a cold kind of persistence. You'll work while others rest, correct mistakes no one sees. Stand in front of the mirror each night and hold yourself accountable in silence. No praise, no audience, no recognition. But in that time, you create a distance others can't close. Because they need attention to keep going, you only need progress. Someone solid enough not to perform will always force others to adjust. When you enter a room without introductions, when you succeed without explanation, when you carry presence without force, that's when you truly control your place in this world. And to have that, you must learn to let action speak. No declarations, no loud affirmations. Just the cold consistency of someone who knows exactly where they're going and doesn't need permission to get there. Results never lie. They don't need you to posture, to prove, or to shout. They only need you to keep going, quietly, steadily. In spite of all the doubtful stares, when you are patient enough to stay unmoved by the need for recognition, you'll reach a place where your presence alone becomes a statement. There's nothing left to say, nothing left to explain. You've let your silence echo louder than any voice ever could. I used to be the kind of person who believed that if I was kind enough, sincere enough, patient enough, everything would fall into place. But then came the days when all my efforts were still misunderstood, doubted, and dismissed just because I didn't respond the way people expected. I began to feel out of place in conversations, disconnected in the very spaces that once felt safe. And what hurt me most wasn't what others said, but the way I stayed silent to preserve peace, only for that silence to be seen as weakness. From those moments, I learned to withdraw, not to run, but to protect the only thing left, an inner self untouched by the need for external validation. I stopped trying to be understood. I held on to one rule. Response must always be a choice, never an impulse. And from that point on, I lived without noise. But that silence was never powerlessness, it was a form of power. If you found value in this video, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future content. Because to live a Stoic life isn't about appearing strong, it's about no longer needing to prove that you are. I'll see you in the next video.